Hello and welcome to another episode of DCU Daily. And today we are talking about The Batman Part 2. And of course, it's a movie that's been in development ever since the first Batman came out. It was basically inevitable, like like Thanos would say. And the first movie being such a financial success, such a big hit with the critics and the audiences, there was no doubt in anybody's mind that they were going to make a second movie. And I'm pretty much stating the obvious at this point. The question is, who's going to be the villain of this second movie? Ever since the first movie came out, even within the Batman, we had some hints as to like what some other antagonistic forces in this world of the Batman that Matt Reeves has created are. And that includes, the possibility of the cameo that we got from the Joker at the end of the movie. Of course, the Riddler is still hanging about. He's in Arkham now, so he's not like, disposed of. He's in Arkham, so like people can escape Arkham. We know that, and there may be some more shenanigans to come from the Riddler. And then of course we've even seen some of those like montages and stuff, and so like the Court of Owls to do with the Veins and the Arkhams, like the history of those two families. That could be something that they can dive into as well. And there was a few other more inferences and things that people have been leaning on based on the story and how certain things played out, where you're like, oh, that character was on screen for a few scenes, but that could be set up as either the next Robin or the next villain or the next whoever. So there's a lot of possibilities, but today I want to go over all of those possibilities and then start to maybe filter out a few of them. Let's see, like, if you can
Yeah.
narrow down the list. So John, what are your thoughts on the subject? I'm sure you have speculated yourself,
Oh yeah.
within your mind as well as with your friends and whoever else you have had good conversations with about the Batman. It's a franchise that has gotten off to a fantastic start, and now we are getting closer and closer to the sequel because Matt Reeves has been working on the script at this point for a year, 2 years, and the movie's set for release not too long from now. I mean, it's not coming out in 2023, but it's also not like 3 years away. So we must be getting too close to a point where the script might soon allow them to cast somebody in the role, whatever that role is. So
Yeah.
just starting there, who do you have in mind for the villain of the Batman 2? Do you think it's going to be the Joker that we already got a hint of and then a deleted scene, or do you think they're going to go in a different direction?
Um, I would hope they go into a different direction because it's like Barry Keoghan, who played him for his quick cameo in the first film and in that famous deleted scene. Um, I wouldn't mind seeing him as the Joker, but the thing is, he would be the, I believe, seventh Joker we've gotten in live action. I believe because we've gotten Cesar Romero, Jack Nicholson, Heath Ledger, Jared Leto, Joaquin Phoenix, and okay, well, Barry Keoghan would be the sixth. So I know not all of them fought Batman, like like Joaquin Phoenix definitely didn't, and then Jared Leto, they had the flashback sequence in Suicide Squad, but that was not a Batman movie, so it's all like weird and off. But then there was the nightmare sequence and all that. So I just think we've just gotten too much of him at this point. Don't get me wrong, there's a reason that he keeps being used. He's just such a great villain, and there's so many different ways you can do him depending on what comic book age he can't they're referencing. Like the Joaquin Phoenix one is more along the lines of the modern Bronze Age, like psychopathic version, and then you have the Jack Nicholson and Jared Leto versions being more about the Golden Age, where they're like the gangster who just wears clown makeup type of thing. So there's like, don't get me wrong, I would like to see it because I mean, there's again so many different ways you could do it, but it's getting like Superman constantly using Lex Luthor. Again, I'm excited for Superman Legacy and Nicholas Hoult in the role, but a little bit much. So, and I know that there have been tons and tons of rumors about who the villain would be. I know there was a big one way back when that got like immediately debunked. They had like Professor Pig and Clayface and Hush. And then other ones were like the Court of Owls, as you mentioned, and then Scarecrow, I think, was another one. And I think any of those could be good. I think Professor Pig would be really awesome because I just feel like he fits the vibe of the Batman universe, just like this weird, deranged serial killer type of thing. Same with Hush. And in terms of Clayface, they could go either way. They could go with the original Basil Carlo version, which was just like diet Phantom of the Opera, or you can go with the actually like famous version of him as a big clay monster. You would have to really try to make that work in terms of like the more realistic gothic tone of the Batman, but I think any of them could be good. I would like to out of all of them, I feel like the ones that would make the most sense and be the best ones would probably be Pig and Hush. Clayface I wouldn't mind, but I feel like save him for like something more like a universe that's a little bit more fantastical. And then Scarecrow, we've gotten him. Yeah, he wasn't really in Batman Begins that much, but I think I think he would I think I would say leave the villains that we've gotten beforehand and just leave them be. Um I know Matt Reeves did say he wanted to do kind of a realistic Mr. Freeze. I think he could work, but again, like kind of save him for maybe something a little bit more fantastical or something like that. But I think I actually have three really good villains I think would work for this universe, and ones that have not been done before, and I think would just be absolutely perfect. Hugo Strange, I think, would be a really good one. He was easily like the best part about Batman Arkham City, and his episodes in the animated series are really good. So I think getting Hugo Strange would be awesome because definitely okay. So you have this Batman who's like dealing with like a lot of inner turmoil, and now he's finally decided to like, okay, I'm gonna be more. I'm gonna change who I am. I'm gonna be more hopeful, and then Hugo Strange could find out who he is, and then he like kind of regresses in terms of that, like in terms of that character development. Like, okay, I did all this change, and then somebody finds out who I am. Like, what am I gonna do now? But that might be, a little bit derivative with what the Riddler was, since he found out who um Batman was in the first film. So two other ones I think would be really awesome would be Dollmaker and Anarchy. Dollmaker was a New 52 villain that hasn't gotten his due yet. He did appear in live action in Arrow and I think maybe Gotham. I don't know. I never got as far into that show, so I'm not totally sure. I think Dollmaker could work really, really well as like fitting into that sort of like messed up gothic tone of like just deranged serial killers. I think deranged serial killers would just work really well with the universe that Matt Reeves is building. And I think Anarchy could like bring it a step higher. Again, there might be some repetitive actions with mainly the third act with the Riddler just, you know, flooding Gotham because reasons. So it might be a little bit derivative, it might be a little bit repetitive, in terms of that, but I think those 3 villains could be really good for that universe, and of course, like, there's so many that could work, and you could obviously change, but I would want villains that you don't have to change too much to fit into this universe, you know? So I think
Yeah.
yeah, those could be really good.
I mean, I personally think like Mr. Is it Mr. Freeze or Doctor? Why am I blanking on this right now?
It's Mr.
Just,
Freeze.
just,
It's ironic
just
that one of the few that's, like, an actual doctor is called Mr. Freeze. Go figure.
yeah. Um, I don't know. I get one. I know in the movie in Batman and Robin they were like doctor. That they referred to him as doctor on a few occasions. But anyway, I think that's the character that you could really because that's somebody who for there was a speculation around the idea of how can you take a more fantastical villain from the rogues gallery of Batman and bring him into uh the world of the Batman, which is
Mm,
much more grounded and more film noir, but still feels much more realistic than what you would anticipate, from the DCEU, which in contrast, you had like Killer Croc in there, even though it was in the Suicide
yeah.
Squad, but like they exist in the world of that version of the Batman. But As far as like somebody like Mr. Freeze goes, like you said, like much like Clayface, there's two different ways you can go about it. You can go about it in the much more fantastical way that you might be able to do more of in the new DCU, which is totally fair because the new DCU is going to have all of those, super powered characters and metahumans. Whereas I think so far, and it doesn't seem like they're going to have metahumans in the Batman's world, because I think once you introduce one metahuman, then you kind of like open the floodgates for like every other metahuman of any kind whatsoever. So I think they're gonna probably want to stick to something more grounded, at least in the first sequel. It's sort of like with the Dark Knight Rises. I think they even though Bane isn't necessarily super fantastical the way it was portrayed, it definitely was a more high concept villain than what we got with like the Joker in the second movie. Although some might say the third act of the Batman Begins was more fantastical than any of the other the other two movies were. But having said that, I think Mr. Freeze, unlike what we got from Arnold Schwarzenegger in the '90s, which was
Yeah.
I thought a pretty solid performance for the kind of movie that it was. He just had a lot of fun with it. I think you can do a much more serious, more grounded version of the
Yeah.
character where like you can immediately just I mean everybody who talks about it, they talk about like, "Oh, have you not watched like, Law and Order or like CSI?" Mr. Freeze is like a villain of the week right out of one of those shows, like a serial killer who freezes their victims or something, right? Like it's you could do
Yeah.
that. I mean, that would be very obvious like way to approach it. I'm not saying just because it's obvious it's not a good way to go about it. You can just say Matt Reeves takes that and then builds on it and then creates something truly unique. I
Right.
just think that when it comes down to it, though, having just done the Riddler, who essentially was like a serial killer in that film. Like, if you
Yeah.
look at it, like when the police filed a report and when they put him in Arkham, they were like, this guy's a serial killer, right? Like, so
Yeah. He's Diet Zodiac essentially.
exactly. Like, so no matter how you dress it up, otherwise, the fact that they almost took down the whole city at the end and all that jazz, which, by the way, seems to be a theme in the Batman movies of late. No matter which director is directing them, in the first Nolan movie, Batman Begins, they're trying to make the city go crazy with microwave. Supposedly, if the microwaves were that strong that they were evaporating water in real life, you would be killing people and like literally boiling people alive. So there was a little bit of like sci-fi aspect to like how that
Yeah.
worked. But I mean, in the second movie, still they've got like most of the city's population at risk, and then the third, in the Dark Knight Rises, the whole city goes to war at the end of the film. And then with the Batman, the majority of the city is flooded, and so there's a mass evacuation. And in all of those instances, they're like the kind of level events where like the National Guard has to be called in. Literally, the military has to come in and help out, right?
Yeah.
And my thing is like we did not always have that happen in Batman movies, right? Like
Mhm.
in the '90s, even in Batman and Robin, where the whole city gets frozen over, it seems like the police and Batman and his team of other caped crusaders managed to take care of everything. I personally think that maybe this next movie should kind of scale it down a little bit, and
Yeah.
we
Make it more
should
personal.
yeah, exactly. Like for example, that's one of the biggest reasons why the Ben Affleck Batman movie, appealed to me so much because they pitched it as this Deadshot versus not Deadshot, but
Deathstroke.
Deathstroke versus. There's
Yeah.
so many Death characters. Like the Deathstroke versus Batman story, and it just to me like spoke volumes because while they did like a light version of that in the Arrow verse with the Arrow and Deathstroke. I think like if they did that with like somebody like a Ben Affleck writing that script, and of course also being in the role, you would get a fantastic story where all of a sudden Deathstroke has some personal like vendetta against Bruce Wayne, aka Batman, and he knows about. I mean, it would just feel different, like it like a revenge. We haven't kind of for a character that I think is about as well suited to like a revenge, like thriller kind of a movie. We have never really seen that with the Batman, and I think it's more to do with the fact that most filmmakers are like, well, Batman's not somebody who's going to go after revenge. But the thing is, the Batman doesn't have to be the one who's trying to like seek revenge. It could be the other guy or whoever the villain is
Yeah.
coming after him, and he simply like finds himself being hunted. Like he's usually the hunter and he becomes the hunted. And I know that trope has sort of been leaned into, like whether it's with the Joker kind of turning almost the whole city against him by the end of that movie in The Dark Knight, or like even in the end of the Batman, you have all these other Riddler disciples who are hunting the Batman in the arena. Like it's we've seen that, but I really want to have like a whole movie where it becomes like this constant back and forth. Like take a what was that John Cusack movie? Was it with Morgan Freeman or something? That was it, The Fugitive? No, that's like a Harrison Ford movie. But I'm trying to think. There's one where he goes on the run, and it's just and he's like wrong. And there's all kinds of examples. There was a Will Smith movie where he's wrongfully accused, and he's a
I know
lawyer,
that one. That one had
right?
Gene Hackman in it. Enemy of the State. That was the
And you
Will
had the
Smith
state.
one. That was really good. Yeah, I think anything like that could be really cool. They just try to, change it up and that kind of thing. I think, yeah, but going back to Mr. Freeze, I think, I don't know, just like, because I'm so like on the fence in regards to Mr. Freeze, because I'm like, I want to see him redeemed in terms of live action films, because we know how great the character can be. I mean, look at Heart of Ice. That is just like the quintessential Mr. Freeze story. That was just so good. And I think there are plenty of villains that can be redeemed, like some like people who didn't get like that, sort of thing. Like something um although it might be again repetitive with the Penguin coming out this year. I would like to see Black Mask like done right rather than whatever the hell he was in Birds of Prey. I think he would be, that character like kind of like maybe not like total mob boss, but like you could like do that and then like have like and you have to have like the Batman and Penguin team up because like Black Mask is like so sadistic that he's encroaching upon Penguin's territory and just doesn't care, and like you can have that like dynamic because I know Penguin has kind of been, I don't want to say not definitely not an anti-hero, but like someone who has to like be like morally stretching um his ways to like kind of just get what he wants but forcing to like work with the Batman. I think that could be really cool to take down Black Mask. Again, going back to the more derivative stuff of serial killers, Victor Zsasz definitely, because he was also in Birds of Prey in a bit part that nobody remembers. Um, and I think he could definitely be really cool, just like really exceeding what like how like far like the criminal mind can like possibly go. Or even Two-Face. I know Two-Face was done well in The Dark Knight, but he was kind of a footnote in that movie. Like as great as that movie is, he was a bit of a footnote. And the one that a lot of people remember because he was the main villain was in Batman Forever. And as much as I really like Batman Forever, he was definitely not the good part of that movie. Um,
Yeah.
so I think like you could definitely do redeemed villains very well. Would I prefer villains we've never seen in live action? Absolutely. Just get like a bunch of like maybe not like Z-listers, but like maybe B and C listers to kind of, bring into like the public perception a little bit. I know Gotham did a lot of, bring it. I mean, it was a show, so they brought so many villains prior to Batman becoming Batman that it was just ridiculous. So it's like,
Yeah.
I feel
I mean,
like
it's
bringing in
with
those,
every Batman show that has ever been done where they're like, "Oh, it's not really about the Batman." What ends up happening is they slowly like veer off into the direction of, well, it's not about the Batman's not going to be in the show, but everything but the Batman is going to be in the show. So like
yeah,
they slowly like devolved into like it's everything but the Batman. Like it's sort of like what I think it happens not just with Batman. It happens. I think the Sony Marvel universe is having the same issue, where they've gotten getting to a point where they have got everything but Spider-Man in those movies,
oh
and
yeah,
and you're starting to because you get to a point where you're like it becomes more and more obvious that there's like this big hole that they just can't fill because that's the way the whole thing is conceived, and it just it starts to feel like you're never gonna quite live up to your full potential when you don't have that. And I think that was ultimately one of the downfalls of that show with Gotham because they had
yeah,
it almost like Bruce Wayne became the least interesting character on that show that he didn't even feel like he truly belonged at one point, like, because there was all this other stuff happening. I was like, "What is this show at this point?" Like,
yeah.
because like, the rogues exist there to antagonize Batman, and if there's no Batman, then who are they antagonizing?
Yeah,
Um,
like, you could have just adapted Gotham Central. It's like, what are
yeah.
you doing? I tried to get into the show, but I couldn't make it past the first couple of episodes. It was just not good to me, at least. I
Yeah,
know a lot of people liked it, but, I just couldn't get into it.
it it went for, like, long enough to, I guess, justify its existence, and certainly, I think by the end of the show, we got, like, a hint at its own version of Batman, which was some sort of a mix between the '90s Batman costume and the Dark Knight Batman costume with the Cape
And
lapel,
whatever
but
dumpster diving they did to get that
the stupid
look.
nose. That nose was way too big. I clearly that kid had some growing up to do, and like growing literally into the costume. Um, but like I like some of the ideas that we've been throwing around. I just think like ultimately the what I think both of us agree on is that we want to go in a different direction than what we have gone with before. The
Yeah,
Riddler was an example with the Batman where we did a villain that was sort of redeemed. It was sort of like what happened with Bane in The Dark Knight Rises. Like whether you can or cannot understand what he's saying half the time, you gotta admit that Tom Hardy's Bane is probably the best live action version of the character that we have ever seen, and certainly
yeah,
a huge improvement and upgrade over the one that we got in the '90s. So I think the Riddler again, similar situation. That they it was an easy home run, like with
yeah,
how low the bar was. And I mean, no offense to Tommy Lee Jones, but it clearly that movie in the '90s was not quite
yeah,
like anybody's best work from that era. So they had an easy, path. Not
yeah,
saying
it's like, you
that it
can
was
only
easy
go
to
up
make a
from
good
here
Riddler.
type of thing.
Exactly, but, like, I mean, I guess if they had gone with the more classic question mark and I mean, I like the aspects where we were getting a little bit of, like, the green color with, like, the laptop conversation back and forth and typing out the what was
Yeah,
the who is the Batman or who is the bat with wings or something like that,
yeah,
the rat with wings, yeah, that's not the bat with wings, it's a bat, that's the answer. Anyway, um, I think that whereas we have seen that so far, and of course, we're gonna have another Joker movie out by the time this movie comes out, the Batman Part
right.
2. Yes, like you said, like, have the Joker in there sort of in the background, but let's not, like, really put him as the central focus. If
Yeah, like,
anything,
have
like
him
he's
be like a
yeah,
Hannibal Lecter type where he just gives advice to Batman and then he just kinda stays in Arkham. Like, okay, cool, he exists, just don't
yeah.
use him again. Again, sixth time we've gotten a Joker, and it's like, "Alright, come on." Like,
You
we
know what'd be
like
really
him, we
cool?
love him, but,
It's predictable, but I think audiences would go for it. Like, it would be cool if they had a story that it revolved around the Joker helping out the Batman
yeah.
with solving a crime, but somehow by the end of it, the whole thing kinda comes back to the Joker, like, plotting his own escape to eventually, try to confront Batman again outside of Arkham, and that's how we leave the 2nd movie so that we really set him up as, like, the big bad in the 3rd film.
I
You
actually think
know
there should be another sorry to cut you off, but I think
Mhm,
there should be another direction for that. Get someone, get whoever for the 2nd movie. I know trilogies are the big thing now, you gotta do a trilogy.
yeah.
I would say, hell with that, do a saga. I think what they should do is for part 2, grab anyone and grab anybody, like, whether that's, the doll maker or Clayface or whatever. Do that, but have some hints for later films, obviously, as you would do. And then have Batman Part 3 and Batman Part 4 adapt Court of Owls, because I feel like you need a lot of stuff to make you can't fit Court of Owls in one movie, and with what they're teasing in the future, it feels like they're definitely going towards Court of Owls, and I
Oh,
feel like
yeah.
you need a lot of
I'm
time to make that
yeah.
work. So have, like, maybe, like, a really small villain in, like, the 3rd movie, so it's not, like, just, like, teasing and purely investigation, because there are some people that are like, "Oh, it's boring," and all that. I don't think so. I like the detective work. I thought that, even though Batman was a terrible detective, but that's beside the point. I think, like, have, like, maybe, like, a super duper, like, D-list villain in maybe part 3, but with slightly more focus on, like, the Court of Owls that we don't know is the Court of Owls yet. Like, you could have, like, Maxi Zeus would be a good one, like, not necessarily a crime boss, but sort of like a cross between a crime boss and, like, corporate billionaire type of thing, and, like, combine those into that, like, sort of like a Lex Luthor, Black Mask amalgamation and do that, because I think Maxi Zeus, he's a fun villain, but I think you could definitely bring him down into that more realistic sort of thing, or even have like the sillier villains like Catman or like Electrocutioner. I think those could be like, just again, like really small villains that would never be adapted. Like Electrocutioner is a guy with electric gauntlets. Like that's like easy to do, and you could like make that work.
Yeah.
Like a guy who took apart a lamp and then just made this outfit, and then he's like, "I'm gonna fight Batman," and like just do that. I think that could be like kind of bring in like a fun vibe, but then like in the background have like this super serious build up, and then Court of Owls. You could definitely pay that off, and then even then in part four, you could have the Lincoln March version of Owlman. I know that's like different from the Crime Syndicate one that everyone likes, but I think you could bring that in too. So you could like bring in like a lot of aspects, but I definitely think that get someone for part two, maybe slightly more fantastical than the Riddler. You could definitely do Mr. Freeze or Clayface, and then have like Court of Owls be part three and part four. And then obviously don't like end it, but like, oh, ambiguous, you could make another
Yeah.
one, but let's not make another one. This is his arc. And I think that could be really awesome. I think that you could definitely do that really well.
Yeah, yeah, and I think, like, your point about the trilogy, I think trilogies are meant to be, like, that safe point that
Yeah.
they build it so that you can kinda, like, walk away if you want at that point. Of course, to get to a trilogy, you need to make sure, like, each successive movie does well enough because it's never a guarantee. Even I think even like movies like those Star Wars saga films, the Skywalker, so the sequel movies essentially. Even that trilogy only made it to a trilogy because each movie was like $1 billion hit. So you have to be financially successful. Now the first movie has been, the second movie most likely will be unless they completely shit the bed, which I don't think they're gonna do.
No.
One thing we do have to sort of keep in mind though is not only have they been sort of hinting, well, that whole 10-minute sequence with the whole montage looking back at the history of the Arkhams and the Waynes was, in my opinion, explicitly there to set up the Court of Owls eventually and just like kind
Yeah.
of get into that
Oh yeah,
story
definitely.
eventually. And whether they tackled that in the movies or they started off in like a spin-off or like whatever the case might be, we do have to keep in mind for the second film, they're doing a whole Penguin series, not just so that they can write off the character within that show. I think the idea there is to build him up to a point where he's a big time player within the world of the Batman. I
Oh
don't
yeah.
know what the plan is in terms of like multiple seasons of that show or whether this is just to set him up to the point where he becomes the main villain of the second movie and it's just in front of our eyes that hey, this show is literally going to set him up to be the main antagonist. And of course, having already got the Riddler and the Joker hanging out in Arkham, you've got to. The one thing I will give them praise for, no other Batman series before this, I mean, aside from the DCEU, which by nature of being an extended, like a whole shared universe, they had all this stuff going on because they needed to make it feel like a big, universe that people are living in. But as far as just any prior Batman universe that's just been about the character of Batman, we have never seen it develop this early, this deep in terms of like, okay, there's
Oh
some
yeah.
pretty big hitters just hanging about. Like a bad day for Batman in the world of Christopher Nolan's trilogy would have been what? Like Joker breaking out of prison, Harvey Dent's dead, until Bane shows up. Like it wasn't like maybe a couple of things could go here or there, but like it was almost like there was always only like a singular threat that you can kind of foresee because they weren't really. I mean, and like the Scarecrow character was always sort of like a low level villain after the first movie. He would kind of come in and out, and then all the different mafia and the gangs were around, but street level crime. Like there wasn't any like big hit like the Rogues Gallery level villains just hanging about. And of course, with Heath Ledger passing away, we knew that even though the Joker was somewhere in Arkham, like or somewhere in the prison system of Gotham, he wasn't really going to come back unless they decide to recast him, which they wouldn't, and so on and so forth. So, and in the '90s, it just felt like they brought on a villain, killed them off by the end of the movie, and then they moved on. It was never like really
Yeah.
any real hold on to this guy for later. Whereas
I mean,
now,
even for like the Riddler, he was in Arkham and he was so beyond, like, if you remember from Batman Forever, he was so far beyond like he would never be a
yeah,
villain again because he was so
yeah,
gone. So yeah.
exactly. And I mean, they like heal Bane by the end of. I mean, they did some like or like Poison Ivy. I
No,
don't
I
know.
think I think Bane died by the end of Batman and Robin.
Was it? Okay, it might have. I mean, I think
Because
was
I
it
think
or
they
was it
took
Mr.
away
Freeze?
his the venom that he was
Yeah,
using, and then he just became a skinny wimp again. So
that's probably what it is. Okay, well, I misremember. That movie was so wacky, I'm sure, like but the point that I'm trying to make is
yeah,
ultimately none of these other prior iterations have sort of like set up because clearly I think for the first time ever we were seeing Matt Reeves being the one to do it, a really big vision. This is like this is a true Batman universe because
yeah,
like I said, like a bad day for Batman, a bad day at the office for Batman could be that the Riddler and Joker are back on the streets and the Penguin and his crime, empire is on the rise. And of course, all the other unresolved, police and corruption scandals are still out there from the previous movie. And then whatever next threat comes down the road. Plus, the fact is, like, yeah, they might have like unflood, like they might have fixed the flooding in the entire city between the first movie and the second. But I doubt that they're gonna make it seem like it was years ago. Like there will probably still be like you know echoes of that whole disaster because that's like a big problem. Like when you have that level of flooding happening across an entire city, it's kind of like even today when you look at the subway system in New York City, they still have like a lot of damage, like subway tunnels that were damaged by like Sandy Hook and like the not Sandy. Why am I like I totally just misquoted the name of the hurricane, but like was it Hurricane Irene, Hurricane Sandy, and then there was a few
yeah,
others that like literally New York City and Manhattan was flooded, and like years later, almost a decade later, they're still damaged from those. Like it wasn't fixed. So I think they
yeah,
can probably take inspiration from that. In fact, I'm willing to bet that they will. That he's already got a broken city. So yeah, I think that to me, like if this is another topic for another day, I think it screams that the Bat family is probably going to come into play at some point. Maybe not
yeah.
that there will be other Cape Crusaders running around, but there will be probably like they might introduce a not a Barbara Gordon immediately. I don't think Jeffrey Wright's Gordon was all that old in the first movie, but they will probably start to bring in other characters who start to become
To be
allies.
fair, Barbara Gordon technically is, well, unless you're doing New 52, is technically not his kid. It is it's his niece who he adopted because I believe her parents got into a car accident. So,
Well, could
you
go.
could use that. You could use
Mhm.
that.
That's
So,
definitely a direction to go into. Yeah, I think that
we'll
also the
see.
new mayor by the end of the first movie, I think, was a character that felt like she wasn't just willing to like go through the official channels to help the city, but maybe she might be prone to some vigilantes
Mm,
after seeing the Batman do his work at the end of that book. Anyway, now we're going off into other tangents. I think as far as the Batman Part Two goes, if I had to ask you to pick one villain that you would like to see, like truly in the second movie, because I know we have pitched like 100 different ideas. Who
oh,
would
yeah.
you select for the Batman Part Two? Who do you think Matt Reeves has in mind for the as the primary antagonist of that film?
If I had to choose, oh god, that's so tough because even though I did my own, honestly, I would have to probably go with one of the rumored villains, even though they're probably, because there's so many rumors, Matt Reeves is like, "Okay, I'm not doing any of these." If I had to choose, I'd probably wanna go with Clayface because, 1, he's never been done before. 2, I feel like you could go 2 different ways with that. Yeah, you could do, like, what Basil Karlo was in his initial appearance, which was just a guy in a mask killing crew members on a movie set. So you could do that. But I feel like maybe not having him be this, like, giant behemoth of clay, because I feel like that might be too much. Maybe, like, just, like, have him be, like, this walking body horror monstrosity, just, like, but he's still, like, a guy, like, he's still, like, he can, like, maybe he's just, like, a shapeshifter, like, he can kinda like what it was sort of with, the animated series, what it kinda started out as, where he was just kinda like this shapeshifter, and then he, like, became, like, this clay monstrosity, sorta, so I think definitely do that, like, introducing the smallest bit of fantastical to kinda differentiate it from Nolan's, which was also sort of this realistic Batman, like really feed into more of the, fantastical aspects. Obviously, not too much, but I think Clayface as sort of like a mild like shapeshifter could definitely be really good, and I think could fit into this world properly.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I think that's a good one to pick out because you're gonna be able to, start him off and very feasible, and how fantastical you go really depends on,
Yeah.
your take on the character. I personally think that they should just have the Penguin there as, like, now he's sort of that new Falcone, right? But
Mm,
much like Falcone was not the primary, like, antagonist of the movie, but he was there as, like, the one pulling all the strings. I think Penguin is probably gonna play a similar role because with how great Colin Farrell has done a job with him, even if it did not have in mind such a long-term role for him as the Penguin, I think now they're probably thinking, we're not just gonna like have the Penguin get wasted in the second movie. Like he's not
mm,
like gonna get killed off. This guy's gonna stick around, and there may even be a necessary evil sort of a relationship where the Batman has to sort of not maybe directly prop him up, but keep him around because he helps him like solve some crimes and so on and so forth. Maybe there'll be some sort of a antagonistic relationship there that's like a necessary evil relationship similar to the one with the Joker. In fact, I think the reason why they cut out the whole sort of scene with the Joker, if you have watched that deleted scene, it's very similar to the scene that was in the movie where he's interrogating the Riddler. And it's sort of
yeah,
like just, and I just felt like they cut it out because for probably for time, but also because they were introducing a huge element that's only there for one scene. And so it would kind of stand out all by itself. But it also would have then been like, oh, we already had that whole exchange of dialogue to deduce what's going on next, and then we get that with the Riddler anyway. Plus, I think that scene really felt like a very fan fictiony. Like the whole how you when you watch a bad fan fiction and you see just Joker and Batman or like Batman and some other character or maybe even Spider-Man or whatever exchanging some like lines of dialogue which is meant to sort of like enlighten us on who these characters are and everything that we already know about their motivations and they're just like throwing insults at each other. It just felt like that. I think that scene sort of really was on. I think it was teetering on the edge there. So, having said that, I think with the very little that we did see of the Joker in the first movie, I don't think he's going to be the big villain. And much like with the Penguin being an antagonistic force, but not the primary villain, I
mhm,
personally would love to see. I brought him up before. I think Mr. Freeze would be a good villain to bring in. However, I don't want Mr. Freeze to come in as another serial killer because we've already done that with the Riddler. And
yeah,
and then the core of the story would be pretty similar because then the Batman's just solving one killing to the next to the next to the next until they find him. I think we need to go in a slightly different direction and kind of do what they did in the Batman and Robin where he was motivated by his wife, like trying to save his
yeah,
wife. It just happened to be a very corny movie, and how he went about it was very much not according to the laws of physics. But like, I think in this movie they can kind of like narrow that down and make it more realistic in terms of what he is after to like help save his wife who's dying, and therefore maybe that involves killing people, maybe involves doing other things, and the Batman is just sort of going after him, and it would kind of help them sort of like you said get to another great story in the world of the Batman while setting up the pieces for the Court of Owls to truly take shape in the upcoming movies beyond that. And
yeah.
I personally looking forward to the idea of if they were to do like 5, 6, 7 of these movies. I don't know if Robert Pattinson's gonna be interested in doing like 7 of these movies. I mean, you never know. Like
I don't know. He's a
Thor.
big Batman fan. He might be.
He,
He's like, yeah, I'm doing all the artsy stuff now, but like, sure, I'll do 7 Batman movies. I'm
yeah.
okay with
Well,
that.
it's not like these Batman movies aren't artsy either, right? So
Yeah,
it's I think it's also a matter of like, well, by the time you get to the seventh movie, you might be looking at 20 years into the franchise, right? Like
yeah,
it takes like 2 3 years to do these, and who knows, maybe there'll be another strike or something like that, and then movies get pushed, and all of a sudden you yeah. But having said that, like freaking Hugh Jackman's coming back in his like what third decade playing the character. Like he started in 2000, he was in the 2010s. Now he's in his third decade playing Wolverine. We have seen Chris Hemsworth playing Thor for like a dozen. movies at this point. Like he's been in every Avengers movie. He's been in 4, 5, I think at least no 4 Thor movies, and they're working on the 5th one. So it's possible. I mean, there's examples out there. So yeah, but definitely, I think they can adapt a lot of stories. I mean, having said that, the Batman and the DCU, I'm sure they're gonna want to leave some
Right.
breadcrumbs for them to do stuff in the DCU as well. They're not going to adapt every story in the Batman universe. So yeah, guys, we can talk about this literally all day long. There's so many options, so many ways, so many directions we can go in, and of course, we love to hear from you and any comments that you have. Poison Ivy, Mad Hatter, I think are 2 examples as well that somebody mentioned in the comments and doing the live show as we've been talking about it. I think those are 2 characters that, I think we've seen them in the Arrowverse and the 90s Batman movies.
Yeah.
So we could see those could be like the kind of villains that you can kind of bring in, like you said, at the start of the movie and that Batman disposes of, and then you move on to the bigger villain. Poison Ivy nowadays, I think, is also very much associated with like Harley Quinn and like that kind of storytelling, not so much directly with Batman. But we'll see. I mean, there's going to be options. There's definitely going to be
Oh, I mean, the Batman
other.
Rogue Gallery Wikipedia
It's
page is just
it's
endless.
it's endless. It's insane how many, and like you said, there's so many options where you can just go with somebody who nobody has ever heard of, or you
Yeah.
can go with a character that they've heard of but they've never seen an iteration like it, like the Bane in the Dark Knight Rises. We know what Bane looked like in the comics and what we got in the 90s, but the one we got in the Dark Knight Rises was nothing like that. I mean, or almost nothing like that. And then what we got with the Riddler and the Batman was nothing like the Riddler that we had ever seen before, and on any adaptation for the screen, much less for the animated versions or the recent comic book history. So I think they can go in many different directions. Guys, let us know in the comments below if you missed a lot of what we were talking about. You can rewind back and watch it. We have been on this topic now for like almost 40 minutes, and I'm sure we can spend another 4 or 5 hours doing it. So of course, leave a comment in the down below. If you're in the live chat, drop your suggestions down there. We usually try to grab them while we can and talk about them while we're live. But if you miss them, then we will discuss them on tomorrow's episode. I know that we are probably not going to be live for the next couple of days because our schedules don't line up, but we will have DCU daily topics going up that we have recorded for you. We had lots of good discussions to kind of prepare for this week's topics, and then we'll be back live on Monday, and Monday through Friday at 5:30 Eastern we are live with DCU daily, talking about all things like the Batman, Superman legacy, or the new Creature Commandos show. Anything that comes from James Gunn and it's worth talking about, we will be discussing it here. You can bet on that. And so with that, guys, we'll say our goodbyes here for now. Thanks for watching, and of course, keep coming back here for more DCU Daily each and every day here on Oh So Curious. And like and subscribe if you enjoy what you're seeing. That helps us out, gets us in the algorithm. And then we can have a bigger community here, and we'll do this again. And until next time, it's been great seeing you. Go out there, check out some new DC content, come back and talk to us about it, and we'll talk back with you. And until tomorrow, it's been nice talking to you.